want to now turn back to the Middle East, and let's be honest, it's making headlines not just internationally but almost everywhere domestically as well. The coalition applying pressure on Labor to expel the Iranian ambassador after his most recent comments praising the martyrdom of slain terrorist leader Hassan Nasrallah and calling him, quote, a remarkable leader. Joining me now to discuss this and more is Leader of the Opposition, Peter Dutton. Peter, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining me. Labor's saying that we need this relationship to communicate both for us and our allies. Now, I would say that any communication that's occurring is completely ineffective, clearly, given Iran's behaviour. So where do we draw the line between standing up for our own values and accepting something that we shouldn't because someone else wants us to?
Well, Erin, the fig leaf they hide behind is, frankly, a relic of years and years and years ago. It's not the reality today, and I think the Prime Minister here, frankly, needs to show some leadership, show some strength of character, for goodness sake, and start acting in our country's best interests, because at the moment, our country's adrift and we're an international embarrassment when we have a federal government here making decisions based on domestic political benefit instead of what's in our country's best interests. And the Iranian ambassador should be expelled. It frankly should have happened by now. And if it's not due, then I don't know what he needs to do to justify his expulsion from our country.
You mentioned the weak government. I'd love you to give me a specific example or two of what you would have done differently as Prime Minister in the aftermath here in Australia of October 7.
Well, I think if you look at the 12 months that has unfolded over that period, Erin, when those protesters were up on the steps of the Sydney Opera House on October 9, they set the tone, and the Prime Minister was all over the shop. He was trying to walk both sides of the street. That's the moment when the leader of our country should have stepped up to condemn absolutely those acts. There should have been specific instruction given to ASIO and to the Australian Federal Police that the Australian rule of law needs to be enforced, and that we were not going to accept this sort of hate in the aftermath of the worst loss of Jewish life since the Holocaust. 1,200 people were slaughtered. People were sexually assaulted, people were dragged back, and still some are being held captive in unbelievable, unimaginable circumstances this very day. And so that's the leadership that the Prime Minister should have demonstrated, but not just then. We've had months and months and months of people who have been occupying university campuses across the country, just spewing out all of this anti-Semitism, this hate, this racism, this intolerance. The Prime Minister's essentially had nothing to say about it. And so, of course, they're out there now wanting to celebrate the anniversary of the slaughter of those 1,200 people. And why would they expect the Prime Minister to stand up and to stop it? The Prime Minister set the tone over the last 12 months, and it's made our country less safe, and it's diminished our international standing.
I couldn't agree with you more. Look, I know Michaelia Cash and others have written to the government about strengthening laws with regards to the advocacy of terrorism, so i.e. the waving of flags, etc. Has the government responded at all? Do you think they're taking it seriously?
Well, again, there's no evidence of that. People can protest peacefully, but the reality is that we need to make sure that the rule of law is enforced. The police aren't just there to keep the peace. If there are breaches of the law, then the police should act. And if the police are being told by the Prime Minister and the Premiers at the moment that, look, just stand to the side, allow people to protest, these are people who are glorifying the life and the actions of somebody who has been responsible for the murder of women and children. This individual, this organisation, terrorist groups more generally, their business, their trade is to plan and conduct terrorist organisations to disrupt democracies and the way of life that we have fought for. People have defended our country and lost their lives to fight for the freedoms that we enjoy today. Why would we be surrendering that? Why would we be putting it at question or at risk?
Well, we shouldn't be at all, and that's the obvious answer to the question. And that leads me into another question about, well, national security strategy. Now, as you know, Dad, Major General and former Senator Jim Molan fought tooth and nail for one before he died. It became a running joke pretty much with everyone, even though it's really not funny. He tried and tried and tried and was shut down almost at every single turn. I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I have to ask, would you commit to a whole-of-nation national security strategy, not just defence, but fuel security, pharmaceuticals, technology, something all-encompassing. And I'm not asking you this either, Peter, as a form of legacy to Dad, as much as I'd love that. I'm asking you to do this because it matters greatly to the Australian people. They deserve to understand the threat and they deserve to feel confident that our government knows how to handle it.
Well, Erin, it's a completely appropriate question to ask, and I, as you know, had nothing but absolute respect for your father, and I think he was ahead of his time and frustrated by the fact that not enough people were listening to what he was advocating, and he understands in his argument, and when you go back and read it now, it becomes even more relevant of what's happening today. And he understood the axis of evil that's operating when you look at what's happening with Russia, when you look at what's happening with Iran, when you look at what's happening with North Korea, the uncertainty in the South China Sea, etc., etc. And it is a precarious time for the world. The Prime Minister describes it as the most precarious period since the Second World War, and he's right. And so why would we ignore the advice of subject matter experts like your late father? And so I think it is time for us to consider that, to implement into the elements of fuel security, cyber, many other points that he raised. I think we should be looking at it very seriously, and we should be doing everything we can to protect and defend and build up our defences. See, one of the things that we need to remind ourselves of, as was the case in the 1930s, bullies don't respect weakness. And by building deterrence, by investing in defence and making sure that we have the fuel supplies and everything else that makes up the component parts, we make ourselves stronger, and we are able to prevail in a period of uncertainty and provide peace and certainty. You have a greater likelihood of conflict if countries are weak and they're not responding adequately. That's what bullies thrive on, and I think the Prime Minister would be well advised to heed that advice at this point in time. The appeasement model that is being advocated by the government, by Richard Marles in the last 48 hours, is not in our country's best interest, and it's not in the interests of Western civilisation either.
No, I agreed. I get it. So was that a yes?
Yeah, look, there's a lot of money that's involved in what Jim proposed, but the principles of it are absolutely sound, and we need to increase spending in defence, and we'll make announcements in that regard. But can I commit on the run to you to spend tens of billions of dollars? No, but I understand the principles of it. I agree with his theory, and I've read a lot of what Jim had to say, and I spoke with him at the time when I was Defence Minister. So there are elements that we can implement, and others that will take longer because of the money involved, but the urgency is there. The principle is absolutely correct, and I don't think any defence strategist worth their salt can argue with the basis of what he's got in that document.
No, understood. It's a big policy and a big amount of money, but I think you're definitely heading in the right direction. I'm going to take it as a maybe yes. Final thing, NRL Grand Final this weekend. I'd love to ask you, not for your tip, but I want to know which one of the two coaches, Craig Bellamy or Ivan Cleary, you would put as your deputy PM if you could only pick one, and why?
Well, I think you should throw in Chris Fagan as well, because he's had a remarkable run. But he's demonstrated the same tenacity, right? The qualities you want, they all share. And I think that is a really tough question. Actually, I think Craig Bellamy, but you look at the success of Ivan Cleary as well, and the culture that they've both been able to create in the Storm and in Penrith, and that Chris has done in the Brisbane Lions. And I still want to bask for a little longer in the Brisbane Lions' success of last week, if you don't mind, Erin. But it's a tough question. You would take any one of those three, because they are solid citizens and they provide the leadership and the guts and determination, and they bring alpha types together, and to bond them in a united cause. That's a pretty rare talent that they've got. So yeah, that's probably the toughest question I'll get today, I think.
Opposition Leader Peter Dutton, thank you so very much for your time. Really appreciate it.